The teaching today is called, what does it mean to make it in life? Okay, what does it mean to make it? So many people will have a target in mind for their lives, or maybe they'll have several targets. Maybe for some people it's getting a certain job and a certain income level, and then they will consider themselves as having made it. Maybe for others it's getting married and having children. Maybe for others it's paying all your children's school fees until they finish their education, and then you feel like you've done your duty, so you've made it. Maybe for others it's paying off a mortgage for a house, which obviously can take a lot of time, and then you feel like you've made it. Maybe for others it's having cars where you don't owe anything on them. Maybe for others it's getting into a strong enough financial position to retire. You feel like you've made it. And although there's nothing wrong with some of these things, for the majority of the world, the culture that prevails is that making it means materialistic success. So we believe once we have achieved what we wanted to, our life work is complete. We can just rest in the satisfaction of knowing that we have made it in life. The truth is that none of these things define making it in life. These are things that the world calls successes, and not the Bible. And the Old and the New Testament says something interesting about this. So in 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 24, which is a quotation of Isaiah chapter 40, it talks about our earthly lives and also our earthly successes and our earthly achievements. This is what it says: all flesh is as grass, and all the glory of man as the flower of the grass. The grass withers and its flower falls away. So the Bible actually compares our earthly lives to grass. Not a beautiful plant or a beautiful tree, a big acacia tree or eucalyptus tree. It refers to our lives as grass, the lowest plant in the animal kingdom. And it compares our earthly successes, that's where it says the glory of man, it compares it to the little flowers which grow in grass. One moment it's there, the next day you're trampling it underfoot. That's how it refers to our achievements in life. So not a beautiful protea or a rose or a bird of paradise, the little white little flowers in grass, that's our achievements. So really our earthly glories and our earthly successes, no matter how good or how impressive we think they are very small in the grand scheme of things. In James chapter 4 verse 14 it says, "For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away." With that being said, many people today consider themselves as great or as successful because of their earthly possessions. Many even believe that it is just God's reward to them for working so hard in life. Now, of course, it's true that God does bless us for our obedience, to Him, and sometimes this may come in the form of blessings here on earth as well as blessings in heaven one day. But although that's true, let's look at some of the heroes in the Bible, at what their lives were actually like. So if you think about the great lawgiver and the leader of Israel, Moses, he spent 4 decades wandering around in the dry wilderness. He didn't have, a nice house that he owned. He didn't have a settled family life. His children didn't go to a nice school down the road, until they finished. We know that he had at least 2 children from 1 Chronicles, I think chapter 23. His life wasn't like that. They didn't have a nice picket fence around the house, a nice little pet dog. He was wandering around in the dry wilderness for 4 decades. Think of Elijah. he also wandered around in the wilderness, and the Bible tells us the types of clothes that he wore, made of animal hair. He was fed by ravens at one time. He was fed by a poor widow at another time. One of the most used men by God in the Old Testament, one of the biggest characters in the Old Testament. John the Baptist, Jesus said there never has been and never will be a greater man than him. And what was his life like? He was also wandering around in the wilderness, wearing clothes made of camel hair, eating locusts for breakfast. That was his life. Peter, John and James, they were working class fishermen. And even actually after Jesus ascended into heaven, they were still fishermen, because in John chapter 21, Jesus appears to them while they're fishing. And so this was their lives. They were just normal working class men. And of course they were eventually martyred. Paul, probably the greatest missionary who ever lived, he had to make tents for people to earn a living. He was a tent maker. And we know from our study we just did in Philippians, although he was content in every circumstance, he didn't always have the financial support he could have had. The Philippian church helped him, but other churches didn't. So he had to work. That was part of his life. He was also probably martyred. Paul's companion Barnabas, he was tortured and martyred, and there's many other examples. So this should give us a very different perspective of what it really means to make it in life. Because according to the world, none of those men would have made it in life. They would have all been seen to have suffered their whole lives and not really made it. So this is what I would like to submit to you guys. If you do well in school and you're able to go to university one day and you study your dream subject that you've always wanted to study, you will not have made it. If after going to university you qualify in your field and then you gain your dream job, you will not have made it. If you've been working hard your whole career and finally received a big promotion you've always been wanting, and you feel more financially secure than you ever have been, you will not have made it. If you buy a house in Zimbabwe or Simbiti, you will not have made it. If you find someone to get married to after waiting a very long time, you get engaged, you have a nice wedding, you finally married, you will not have made it. If you have a happy marriage for 50 years, you have children, grandchildren, not made it yet. If you are a famous politician, or a scientist, or a doctor, or a lawyer, you will not have made it. If you've served as a missionary for 30 years, helped lots of people, spread the gospel, whatever, and you feel like you can now retire, resting in the satisfaction that you have done the Lord's work, you will not have made it. So what is making it then? Making it is when you die and you stand before Jesus Christ and he welcomes you into his kingdom, saying something along the lines of, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord." Then you will know that you have finally made it. So, if this is what making it is, then what do we have to do to get there? In Luke chapter 24, we have the parable of the Great Supper. And it's very relevant to this topic. So I'll just read it to you from verse 16. It says, "A certain man gave a great supper and invited many, and sent his servant at supper time to say to those who were invited, 'Come, for all things are ready.' But they all with one accord began to make excuses. The first said to him, 'I have bought a piece of ground, and I must go and see it. I ask to have me excused.' Another said, 'I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I'm going to test them. I ask you to have me excused.' Still another said, 'I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come.' So that servant came and reported these things to his master. Then the master of the house, being angry, said to his servant, Go out quickly into the streets and lanes of the city, and bring in here the poor and the maimed and the lame and the blind." And the servant said, "Master, it is done as you commanded, and still there is room." Then the master said to the servant, "Go out into the highways and hedges, and compel them to come in, that my house may be filled. For I say to you that none of those men who are invited shall taste my supper." So you would have noticed that there were 3 different excuses given by the guests in that parable. The one said, "I've bought a piece of ground, I must go and see it, so I ask you to have me excused." Another said, "I've bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I'm going to test them. Can you excuse me?" The third one said, "I have a wife, and therefore I cannot come." So we can do a modern translation of those 3. The first one, "I've bought some land and I'm building my house. I'm too busy for God." The second one, "I bought a new car. I want to drive it around and test it a bit. I'm too busy." Third person, "I've gotten married and my wife and I just want to enjoy our time together. We don't have time for God." And Jesus gave a second parable, which was similar to this, in Matthew 22, called the parable of the wedding feast, which we covered a few weeks ago. And it's about a king whose son was getting married. Everything was ready for the wedding day again, and so he called all the guests, which is how they did it in those times. People were on standby, and then when it was ready, then they would be told to come. But it says in verse 5 of Matthew 22, "But the guests made light of it and went their ways, one to his farm, another to his business." So it's the same kind of thing, they were too busy. And the world has been invited to the wedding, but most people are not taking it seriously. They are making light of it, as it says in Matthew 22, and they've gone their own ways. Some to their farms, some to their businesses, others have gone to science and technology, others to politics, others to music and entertainment, others to the latest philosophies and psychologies, others to the latest medical advances and theories. The point is that people have become very occupied with things. Some people are even too family focused to attend the wedding. They idolize their children to the point that they don't do the most important thing that they need to for their children, which is to disciple them in the ways of the Lord. And they see their children as there to spoil and to entertain and to whatever, but they don't disciple them. Or they idolize their spouses so much that they don't glorify God together as a married couple. They're just focused about making each other happy and pleasing each other and having fun together. They don't actually do God's will together. Matthew 16, verse 25 to 26 says, "For whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul?" So if we forsake God by making light of the invitation that he has given us, because we are too busy with other things, then we have lost sight of the very purpose and the very meaning of our lives, which is to do the will of God. The purpose of our lives is not to do the will of our flesh, or to constantly bring pleasure to our flesh. The purpose of our lives is not to do the will of our minds, or to bring pleasure to our minds. There's many things out there today which are evil, which are designed to bring pleasure to the mind. The purpose and meaning of our lives is to do the will of God, and the prize for doing so is being present at the marriage supper of the Lamb, which will happen in heaven one day, when all the saints, the bride of Christ, will be united with Christ at the supper, the feast, the celebration of that union. But if we ignore his invitation to obey him and to keep coming to him, then we will not be present at that union. And if we think we are able to just sneak in at the last moment then this is what may happen to us. In Matthew 22, Jesus carries on to say, "But when the king came in to see the guests, he saw a man there who did not have on a wedding garment. So he said to him, 'Friend, how did you come in here without a wedding garment?' And the man was speechless. Then the king said to the servants, 'Bind him hand and foot, take him away, and cast him into outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.'" So it's of utmost importance that the invitation we each receive is not ignored or abused as well. And sadly, it's not just the world who turn down the invitation to come to Jesus and to keep coming to him. There are many in the church who also do this. They effectively reject Christ for the things of the world. It's actually widespread in the church, not just among the wealthy in the church, but even among those who are not necessarily wealthy. In the book of Revelation, chapter 2 and 3, in Paul's vision, God addresses 7 churches. They are historical churches, and there are issues in each of those 7 churches. But collectively, those 7 churches represent the state of the church, even today, and the types of issues that are within them. So I just want to read to you about one of those, known as the lukewarm church, which is in Revelation 3, chapter 15. It says, "I know your works, that you are neither cold nor hot. I could wish you were cold or hot. So then, because you are lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will vomit you out of my mouth. Because you say, 'I am rich, have become wealthy, and have need of nothing,' and do not know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in fire, that you may be rich, and white garments, that you may be clothed, that the shame of your nakedness may not be revealed, and anoint your eyes with eye salve, that you may see. As many as I love, I rebuke and chasten. Therefore be zealous and repent." So the fact is, many people in the church feel self-sufficient. Although they attend church or they believe in God, they feel as though they've worked hard, to get to where they are, and so their attitude is along the lines of what's in verse 17 there, where members of the church say, "I am rich, I've become wealthy, and I have need of nothing." They believe that they've got it all. They've achieved a few successes in life, and so they want to start relaxing and start taking their eyes off the Lord. They feel somehow entitled that they have made it. But God makes it clear here that he will not accept those who are lukewarm. It says that he will vomit them out of his mouth. So we cannot be divided between placing our trust in the things of the world and placing our trust in God. The passage that I just read in Revelation 3 says that those who think that they can rely on their money and on their possessions are actually 5 different things. If you look there in verse 17, it says that they do not know that they are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. If you are wretched and miserable, it means that you are very unhappy, very distressed. Despite all your wealth, you're feeling quite empty inside, probably quite lonely, quite lost. And of course, this is the case with many celebrities. According to the world, celebrities should be the happiest and most content people that they are, because they have a lot of money. Yet, so many of them are depressed, on drugs, abusing alcohol, having domestic violence issues, aggression issues, commit sexual crimes, hire prostitutes, gamble away all their money, take their own lives. That's the reality of many celebrities. Many of them are wretched and miserable. So there's obviously a lot of truth in this. And therefore we should never think of wealthy people as the happiest people in the world. Often they are some of the most unhappy people in the world. And sadly, there are also many in the church who are like this. They are not truly born-again Christians, and they haven't truly placed all their faith in God, they've placed their faith and their trust in their money and in their possessions. They do not have the joy of the Lord in their hearts, nor his peace or his comfort. They are wretched and miserable. And I have to be honest, when I was a teenager and a young adult, I felt miserable because I knew that I was off track, I was empty inside, I felt lonely, and so I was miserable because I wasn't following the Lord. And I believe that it's the reality for those who spend their lives not knowing the Lord. There will always be that emptiness, that loneliness, that feeling of being lost. Revelation 3 also says that these self-sufficient people are poor. That's the third thing that's mentioned. How interesting. The rich people are actually the poor people. But obviously what the Lord is referring to here is their poverty in an eternal sense, their poverty in heaven. In Matthew chapter 6 verse 19, Jesus says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where the thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So the last part of that, "for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also," means that those in the church who are overly focused on the material and who treasure such things in an unhealthy way do not have their eyes set on heavenly things. They do not lay up for themselves treasures in heaven. They have laid up all their treasures for themselves here on earth. And so that's where their hearts are, here on earth, which is a fatal mistake, because in Mark 10 verse 25, Jesus says, "It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God." The next thing it says there in Revelation 3 about such people is that they are blind. They are spiritually blind. People who want to trust in their own riches have become blind to the beauty and the riches of God's kingdom. All they see is the temporary kingdom of the world, and so that is what they want to keep pursuing. But the day will come when the kingdom of this world will be non-existent and it will be irrelevant. And those who are blinded now by such earthly things will realize just how blind they were. And finally in Revelation 3 it says such people are naked. You could have the nicest suit in Belito, the nicest dress in Belito, yet you could be utterly naked, spiritually naked, which just means that you are not clothed in the righteousness of Christ. Isaiah 61 verse 10 says, "For he has clothed me with the garments of salvation, he has covered me with the robe of righteousness." So those who feel self-sufficient and who feel important because of the clothes that they are wearing may actually be lacking the most important clothes of all, their garments of salvation and their robes of righteousness. That is why in the Garden of Eden, once Adam and Eve had sinned and they saw their nakedness, and it says that they suddenly became ashamed because their spiritual robes of righteousness had been taken off of them. And so their sin made them ashamed, and they saw their nakedness. They saw who they were. But Jesus' response to such people in Revelation chapter 3 is this, in verse 18. "I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in the fire, that you may be rich, and white garments, that you may be clothed, that the shame of your nakedness may not be revealed." So this is God's offer to us all. He wants to give us something as precious as gold refined by fire. If it is refined, it means it doesn't have impurities. It's completely pure, it's completely precious. And so this is extremely valuable, what he wants to give us. And he also says that he wants to give us white garments. White symbolizes purity again. And so these white garments will take away our shame and our nakedness. The best clothes we could ever have. But Jesus says it comes at a price. Because he says, I counsel you to buy from me gold refined with fire. And it's simple, what is the price? It's giving him our lives. It's actually a very cheap thing to give. It doesn't, it's not something unaffordable. It's difficult, but it's open to us. We can do it. So we need to stop trying to make it in the world and instead just focus on following him, which requires us to hand our lives over to him without delay, so that when the end comes, you will be found to have made it. But please don't think that this message is only for people who pursue wealth and materialistic things. As I mentioned, there are many other things which can also claim, all our attention and take our eyes off God. Other earthly pursuits. It's easy to become proud of an area of your life, or if you're not proud, it's easy to just spend your whole life, pursuing things, chasing after things, to try and gain things, to try and make it, somehow. Any goal or endeavor or achievement which claims more of your attention than God, or that is more important to you than God, is an idol. Even some noble things can be idols, things which are not necessarily wrong, but if it's all you're doing, you're not, focusing on God, you're not giving him your attention, then it's an idol. And the further central issue that many people face today is spending too much time thinking about what making it in life looks like to those around them, or even to the world, who they are trying to impress. When this happens, the real meaning of our lives has changed. Our lives are not about increasing him anymore, it's about increasing ourselves. When John the Baptist had fulfilled his mission, he said, I need to become less so that he can become greater. And this is one of the most effective workers there's ever been of Jesus. He said, I need to become less. So he understood what making it in God's eyes was all about. It was not about his personal glory or his personal successes. It was about faithfully running the race that God had given him. So that's why it says in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 to 2, therefore we also, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. So we keep making it in life by fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and finisher of our race, of our lives. And we need to do that until the end of the race. We do not look to the world for its approval. We do not measure our success according to the standards of the world or the ways of the world. Yes, we'll make many mistakes along the way. We're human. We will not run anything close to a perfect race. But we have to keep at it, and we have to recover from our mistakes and try to make sure that we don't keep making the same mistakes over and over again. Some people join the race early on in life, and others join in later on in life. But what's absolutely crucial is how we finish the race, how we are found at the finish line. And the race could end for us, at any moment. Those who start running the race faithfully, but are then sidetracked by the pursuits of the world to the point where they start rejecting Christ, they will not be saved by their prior life. But those who turn from their wickedness, even if it's much later on in life, and they start living for the Lord and faithfully running the race until they reach the end, they will be saved, and God will not remember their sins. So what's important is how you finish the race. But nobody should ever take this as a license to just do whatever you want until later on in life, because it's only about how you finish. Your race could be ended at any moment, and we don't know when that is. We get this warning in Matthew 24. In verse 45, Jesus says, Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his master made ruler over his household, to give them food in due season? Blessed is that servant, whom, when his master comes, will find so doing. Assuredly I say to you that he will make him ruler over all his goods. But if the evil servant says in his heart, My master is delaying his coming, and begins to beat his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with the drunkards, the master of that servant will come on a day when he is not looking for him, and at an hour he is not aware of, and will cut him in two, and apportion him his portion with the hypocrites. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So, we cannot determine the length of our races. We don't know when we're going to die. Some of us may live long lives, some of us may live shorter lives. But whatever the case, after we die, each of us will be judged as to whether we ran the race faithfully and whether, it was for the Lord. The question will be whether you had real faith in the master of the race. Whether during the race your eyes were fixed on the prize, which Paul told us in Philippians is the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. Whether you finished the race without trying to cheat the race official, and whether you can be counted worthy of receiving the crown of life through the recommendation of the judge of the race, who is Jesus Christ. Revelation 2 verse 10 says, Be faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life. So we must remain faithful to him throughout our lives. And the amazing thing about this is that when we find real joy, we find real fulfillment, we find real meaning, we find real peace, real identity, real purpose. Nothing fills us the way that God does. So you may wonder, but what helps us to make sure that we finish the race strong? Or how can we make sure that we finish the race strong? In Matthew 18, verse 1, the disciples asked Jesus an interesting question, which is effectively, what pleases you the most? What should we be doing? And Jesus said to them, they first said to him, Who then is greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus called a little child to himself, set him in the midst of them, and said, Assuredly I say to you, unless you are converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. So rather than seeking to make it according to the standards of the world the whole time, or even according to our own standards that we set for ourselves, we must become like little children. Children know their limitations, they know what they can and can't do, when they need the help of their parents. There's a distinct, natural humility in children. They know that they cannot do everything on their own. So what Jesus is really after is a heart of humility that has surrendered to the will of the Father, not the will of the self. In Mark 10 verse 31, Jesus said, But many who are first will be last, and the last first. So we are to live with this humility, putting the purposes of God first in our lives, and our service to Him first, above ourselves and above our own desires. But for those who are constantly striving for worldly successes above serving God and obeying God, they will end up last, Jesus says. Those people who think that they are greatest in the world are actually the least in the kingdom of God, if they are in the kingdom of God. So in summary, to make sure that we make it in life, we need to be humble and faithful servants of Christ all of our lives until the end. And in order to do that, we need to run the race with endurance and keep our eyes fixed on Him, the author and finisher of our faith. He's the one who starts off the race, and He's the one who judges the end of the race. You know, He's the one who stands at the start line with the gun and sets everyone off to stop the race. And He's also the one who's at the finish line and checks everybody who crosses the finish line. He also watches you throughout the race. He will allow you to stumble and fall a few times in the race. He will even allow you to run off track in the race a few times. And He's actually a very unusual race official because He actually helps you along in the race. He even redirects you when you need it. He can even pick you up and carry you for part of the race if you need it. However, when the time for the end of the race comes, He will not show grace and mercy anymore. Then He will take His rightful place as judge. He will no longer act as, the race marshal or the water carrier for you or your coach. He will not be the first aider sitting on the side, helping you when you need help. He's not going to be the one in the crowd cheering you on anymore, which He does throughout the race. You will be the judge of the race, and you will be judged. In Matthew 7, verse 13 to 14, as I end, it says, "Enter by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and there are many who go in by it. Because narrow is the gate, and difficult is the way which leads to life, and there are few who find it." So the world is travelling on the way that is broad, and the gate which leads down that road is wide. It's very easy to pass through it, no problem. And most of the world are spending their time trying to make it in life in some way or other, which means travelling through that gate, because that is what everybody is pursuing. That is what our flesh is telling us to do. It's easy. On the other hand, passing through the narrow gate is not so easy. It requires the sacrifices that we've talked about. But finding the narrow gate and finding the way which leads to life is actually relatively simple. All you have to do is take your eyes off the world and fix them on Jesus, the author and finisher of your faith. He is the one who helps you to finish the race in the way that you need to, so that at the end you will be found worthy and to have truly made it.